This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions, www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe and welcome to our circle.
Hello, everybody. This is Patricia W. Fisher with Readers Entertainment Radio, and it is June 17th, and we are already pretty deep into the summer, but just remember, keep using that sunscreen because it is National Skin Cancer Awareness Month, so be sure and check yourself. Make sure that you are properly covered with, sunblock and lip balm and eyeglasses. All those things make a difference so we can all, have good health, because if your skin's not healthy, you're not going to be healthy. And it is also, today is National Garbage Man Day. So, I think it's a really unappreciated job because somebody's had to do this job, and people are out every day collecting the stuff. So just at least give a wave and a thank you, because it's a big deal. And then it's also National Bartender Day. So, maybe you toast to the garbage man, or maybe you just, give them a gift card or something. They can go get their own drink. So there you go. And one of the things that is really, really fun in the summertime for me, and I love this because I would go to the library and load up a bag of books every week, was reading, reading all day long, because I grew up in Houston. So we would go out in the mornings and then come inside a little bit because it was oppressively hot, and then go inside, read, go back out till it was dark, and then come back in and read until I couldn't keep my eyes open. And one of the most favorite things I love to read was historical fiction. And so I have a book for you, historical fiction lovers. You have to read this book. So a public relations professional, Denny S. Bryce, spent more than 20 years running her marketing and public relations firm. For 10 of those years, she wrote and read Buffy Spike fan fiction. And before fan fiction, her days as a PR diva, the graduate of Barat College at DePaul University, was a professional dancer, part-time singer, and bad actress. She worked with, and bad is in parentheses because I know she's spectacular. She worked with professional dance companies in Chicago and New York, and a theater production which almost debuted in Off Broadway, which is fabulous. Her debut novel, Wild Women and the Blues, brings the past and the present together when a grieving film student, Sire Hayes, seeks out the 110-year-old Honoré to get answers for his thesis on the legendary filmmaker Oscar Micheaux, and they discover more than they bargained for. The book has been featured in O Magazine, Bustle, Parade, Marie Claire, and a ton of others. You can find Denny at her website, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and I have all those links in the write-up of the show. So welcome, Miss Denny S. Bryce. How are you today, my dear?
I am fabulous, and thank you, Patricia, for having me. This is very exciting. I love doing radio, so this is pretty great. Thank you.
And, I stayed up late last night, so it's your fault that I have to drink extra coffee today because I'm reading your story. I am so happy for that. But it's one of those things that I've always loved history, and a lot of the people that you have in your books, I've followed Josephine Baker for 30 years and everything. And it's one of those amazing things that you're like, oh, I know that person, or I know of that person. And then you start doing more research and you start looking, and it's like this rabbit hole of information. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, how did you limit yourself when you were starting this project? Because we'll get to the origin story here in a sec. But how did you limit?
Okay.
I mean, you set a timer? Did you okay, I'm only going to look for this? I mean, how did you do that?
I wish there was that much self-control in me. But honestly, Wild Women in the Blues took me 6 years to write. So I would say my success at avoiding the rabbit hole for that first book was limited. And because it's such a fascinating thing to dive deep into history, African American history, that on many levels you, as an African American, I'm assuming I should know, or that I do know, but I don't know because it's not taught in school. It wasn't a part of at least in undergrad, and so the opportunity to dig into the different stories, the hidden histories, and bring them to the forefront through, fiction and novelizations. It was just an exciting opportunity, and the history just fed me more and more what if. So I dove right in, and
well,
I
interesting.
I was not a successful rabbit hole avoider.
I wouldn't have been either. I mean, still, I was looking at people from your book, and I'm like, oh, there's that person. Oh, and oh my gosh, they knew that person. Oh my god, and you just keep. And what I found, I mean, I know every year there's always the grumpy grumpers, or I will just call them that for now. They're like, why do we need Black History Month? It's like, this is why, because this is the history that's not being taught. And so if I can introduce somebody who's 10 to this name, this person, they worked with so-and-so, I mean, it's like, oh, really? And then that stirs that curiosity.
Hopefully we'll see more attention paid to a broader curriculum. So that, Black History Month is fabulous, but that's not the only reason to read books by and about people of color. It's part of what should be on the fiction landscape. And what's exciting about what's happening now is that we're seeing more and more and more books by authors of color about their, that are about the culture, but also our stories, are dramatic, are funny, are thrillers, are suspenseful. There's not one bucket that any culture or any author should have to fit into. So being able to have this broad landscape of stories that, because the history is there and the creativity is there, is just a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited about Wild Women in the Blues. I'm very excited about a whole bunch of books that are coming from authors in the months, years ahead.
So tell me, let's go back. So the Wild Women of the Blues is got dual timelines. So you're in 1925 and then 2015. You've got Sawyer Hayes, who is a graduate student working on his dissertation, and he has found, he believes, a lost film of the legendary filmmaker Oscar Micheaux, right? Did I say that right? I was looking for places to make sure I said that right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Oscar Micheaux, and yes, I was like, oh, good, those years of French I took in school worked. But he needs answers, and he finds out that one of the women in the film that he's seen, although blurry, and pictures that he has found all this stuff in his grandmother's attic, have this woman in it who is still alive. And so now what does Sawyer do? And so you've also got her story. You're bringing them together from two ends. Tell me why the dual timeline.
Dual timeline is a story structure that I love. I love reading dual timelines. I love the what you're able to do with them. For example, explore not only a past, but also another timeline that might help you draw in current day modern readers. But in addition, it lends itself to mystery. The what if question or the story question can be explored by two different time periods. So, what happened that has made this person this way a certain number of years later, and what does that journey for that person have on that POV character, at least Sawyer, in the 2015 timeline. So I enjoy that structured very much. So that's probably what led me to write a dual timeline story.
And I completely agree with you, because it's different if you have someone just kind of telling your story, but if you go back into their head when they were experiencing that, so it's like it's present.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that she talks, like Honore is a chorus girl, and so she's talking about the sparkly costumes and the rhinestones and
mm-hmm.
How the bar smelled and the sawdust on the floor and all these different things. And if she was trying to describe it, we'd all be like, oh, okay, but she's in it with the dual timeline.
Yeah,
and we can feel it, we can smell it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun if because I, again, as a fan of reading dual timelines, and of course of just historical fiction, that's part of the job of historical fiction, whether or not it's a biographical fiction or historical fantasy or historical thrillers. You want to, as an author, to bring your reader into that atmosphere, into that environment. And if you are able to accomplish that, you have, through your writing, where you can give people a strong sense of what it smelled like, what it felt like, what it looked like, how people interacted, then, you're doing a lot of your job then.
Yeah. And I know that it just depends on what you're writing, but where do you look in general for these kinds of little tiny details to make sure they're accurate? And then where do you decide, okay, I've tried to look enough, I'm just going to have to fill in the blank on this one, like guess from what's going on at the time?
Well,
conversations,
you weren't there.
Sure.
That's going to rely on creativity. But how those people, those characters interact. I know that I've taken some classes, and one that I remember where the instructor said, photographs are a fabulous resource for a historical fiction author, because in those old photographs, you don't just look at the main images. Look at the things that are in the background. Look at the texture of whatever the people are wearing. Look at when you are at least working in a time period where there are photographs.
Sure.
And newspaper articles. My research included extensive time spent going through the Chicago Defender archives. The Chicago Defender is one of the oldest African-American newspapers and was very prominent in the 1920s. There are also the New Amsterdam News and in New York, the California Eagle in Los Angeles. There was the Associated Negro Press. So there were a lot of fabulous resources, but since I was digging into Chicago, since Chicago was my primary setting for both timelines, I really relied heavily on the Chicago Defender. In addition, I also spent time with archivists at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago, and we explored the map room and the various collections that they had in their possession that were absolutely fabulous. I had a fabulous archivist that I worked with there. Library of Congress was another fabulous resource where I would just sit in their various reading rooms, and the librarians and the archivists would bring me stacks of books, because I'd just given them parameters of what it was that I wanted to dig into, and they were just fabulous in going off. And since they have a far better understanding of their system than I do, they were generous in helping me find different things. So it's not just one thing that'll give you that will familiarize you with the story time that you're writing, and you have to pay that same attention to 2015.
Right.
And that's important too, because there are certain things that had not happened yet, or there were things that were just starting to happen, and you want to really make sure that you don't accidentally throw in a phrase that wasn't common, and just language and circumstances and headlines change so rapidly, and information is so accessible. So you want to do your research very much so in 2015, no matter what time period you're working in, frankly. I think even a contemporary fiction writer is going to be doing research, because they want to make sure that their story has a shelf life, and whatever is happening during that moment in time is a part of their story, and gives the reader that connection to a time and place.
Well, and that was one of the really beautiful, subtle things I noticed, and I know it's very purposeful, the way you wrote it, but when you're doing the dual timelines, the language between the two, and it's really subtle, but it's like the cadence of the story, of the sentence structures. They're a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously slang's a little different.
Yeah.
You've got different things going on, and some are this familiar. And I was like, well, it would be like if I was watching Shakespeare, Jane Austen movie or something that was set in the 1800s or whatever, I would know what they were saying, but I would know it was very, very that period, right? Well, you did the same thing, so you feel disconnect. You're like, okay, I know what a timeline I'm in now, and I know what time, and it was just really cool, because I almost feel like I'm going in a time machine back and forth in my brain. It's like, yay, we're back in the 1920s.
Yeah, and that you are correct. That is very purposeful, because when you switch from one storyline to the other, they call it a handoff, and in that context, you really want to make sure your reader is knows where they are very quickly. Because you don't always, when you're reading, don't always look at the chapter heading.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
You don't always look at the date line that I may put on the page.
Right up front.
You want to just know. You want the reader to know, because that's the difference between a reader-based prose and writer-based prose. You want the reader to have not have to do too much work to know where they are in time.
Yeah. So let's get to it. I want to hear the origin story of all this.
The origin stories. Well, I credit two women with this. And the first is my maternal grandmother, Ella Elizabeth, who came to this country from Kingston, Jamaica, in 1923. And when I was a little girl, in her house were lots of photos. She kept old photos and she put them up on the walls. It was part of the decor. And there was this woman in these clothes with these cars. And I was like, who is that? What is going on there? And these were photos of herself from her youth. And she'd tell me stories. And so I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. This is so cool. And then many years later, I was a professional dancer in New York City. And as many New York City dancers do or did, I waited on tables. So in the evening, you got to make some money, because dancing is always
you got to pay the rent.
Right. And even though I lived with 6 other dancers in a railroad apartment, but that's a whole other book. But
please write that.
So what we it's crazy times too. That one did get written. But the club, the nightclub that I worked at, was called the Cookery. Now, the Cookery was owned by a very elderly man by the name of Barney Josephson. Barney Josephson was also the owner of Cafe Society. Cafe Society was the nightclub where Billie Holiday first performed Strange Fruit. So he opened this cookery, and his guest list were all of these old stars from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'd never heard of any of them.
Right.
And so one of them, though, was making a comeback in her 80s, and her name was Alberta Hunter. Alberta Hunter is also one of the historical figures mentioned in the book, Wild Women in the Blues. And my job when she worked was to bring her tea before her performance, because she always wanted a cup of tea. And it was not that I was sitting around taking notes back then, saying, I'm going to write this story one day. But then later in life, once I started hanging around with writers and working toward becoming a full-time writer of fiction, because I was a writer in marketing and PR and all of that other stuff. But I definitely sort of started to connect the dots, and historical fiction just sort of came to me. So now I'll be writing historical fiction, and historical fiction will be the origin stories, if you will. I'm always going to be exploring the past within the present, or whatever approach I decide to take, because I'm also working on my next book, on deadline for it, in fact.
The deadline.
Yes, fun stuff.
Well, I had looked up, like I was telling you, I was seeing all these, faces and names, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to look this person up. So Alberta Hunter, so she was like, went to Chicago when she was, 11? And then her mom followed her later, and she worked in all these different jobs and wrote these amazing songs and all this stuff. And then she left music for a while and became a nurse.
Yeah. I mean, part of the constant story of many of these stars from the 20s, 30s, 40s, or whatever, is that their careers went through a lot of change, a lot of ups and downs. And I think that before she started her comeback in her 80s, she had disappeared, essentially. Somebody, if I recall correctly, Oscar Michaud died penniless. I mean, there was not an infrastructure in this country for African American talent and entertainers, whereby there was always going to be a job around the corner, because it was, the industry was controlled not by people who were interested in the longevity their careers, of African-American careers in the entertainment industry. So you have some people who were able to, sustain a career, but very often others who did not. And so another element of Wild Women in the Blues, in terms of fashioning my fictional characters, was to take a look at the stories of everyone from the Josephine Bakers to the Alberta Hunters to the Bessie Smiths to many other artists, some of whom who passed away in the 20s, who were at the height of their career for 3 years. And then they weren't there anymore. So all of those factors played a part in creating characters like Honoré, like the 1928 character Bessie, like Ezekiel, for example. My grandfather was a merchant seaman, and he traveled and went away to sea from his origin country of French Guyana. So it's a lot of different things that contributed to the creation of the fictional characters and their interaction with the historical figures.
Yeah, and it's so many stories that just haven't been told yet. And there's all of these. It was interesting because years ago, I have my brothers and I and our sisters-in-law. We all like throw out something every year to just general information. So I tuck it away, thinking of Christmas gifts like down the line at some point. And I said, "Who's everyone's favorite baseball player?" And we were living in St. Louis at the time, and my brothers said whoever, and my mom, and then my sister-in-law said Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell, and I'm like, well, I don't know who these people are because I thought I knew a lot about baseball, and she's like, oh, they're with the Negro Leagues, and I was like, what? So looking them up, and it was cool because the Kansas City Monarchs were so close to St. Louis, and so I had neighbors that had gone and it was just fascinating to sit down and say, tell me about this. Tell me your stories.
Right.
And giving voices to people is huge. Well,
and giving voice, but also the stories are there. The stories are there and need to be told. And the audience is there as well. There are readers who want to read these stories, and the more you have people of color and their stories, African American stories, Native American Indian stories, there will be more readers. So it's a very exciting time, I would say, and hopefully continues through the end of time in publishing for folks to explore and tell stories that are stories they want to tell about the people and the cultures that are important to them.
Well, and I think too, people don't as much as the powers that be tried to segregate things. Everything was really kind of feeding off each other, and so you had this overlap going on as well. So everything kind of feeds each other. So if we only know one part of the story, we don't know the whole story. So it's like this whole blanket, and then we only get half. We need the whole blanket to really. And I mean, I have just
analysis.
We can't feed ourselves and stay warm. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
It was interesting because, in Texas we have 7th grade is Texas history. So, we get to brag about ourselves for a year to our kids. And I really made it was interesting because, we started, my kids and I were looking at stuff and going back and going, oh, and this is why this happened. And in a way it was a little disappointing to get the whole story. But then it was like, well, that's the whole story. So now we know, because it wasn't all very pretty. It wasn't all rah, right on. And we need to know the whole thing.
Few stories.
So,
that's part of the of what happens in histories that are oftentimes, what is the phrase, whitewashed for purposes that can be, deliberately, ugly and whatever, or just through omission because of lack of understanding. And that's another important element of research when it comes to historical fiction, for when you're especially looking at African Americans, people of color, blacks, and really taking the time to understand and examine and explore your source material, because your source material oftentimes written by men, if you're looking back through nonfiction and things like that through time. It's just, and that's part of the challenge of writing stories that feature female protagonists as well in history, is digging to find their story that has not been compromised by a viewpoint that was considered more dominant simply because it was male and white. And that is a big thing. And that's, I think, contributes to the popularity of historical fiction featuring female protagonists.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, tell me,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
when you were looking at newspaper articles, yeah, when you were looking at newspaper articles and you were comparing, like, with the Chicago Defender and then, you know, the predominantly white, you know, sided paper, I guess, way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chicago Tribune. Were you seeing articles that were this about the same incident and how differently they were written, or were there just like no overlap at all, like nothing?
Well, in the 1920s, white newspapers like a Chicago Tribune would talk about the Jack Johnson boxer and his defeat of, but other than that, a major news story or movement, or that's one of the fabulous things about Black press during these time periods in particular, is because that's where you found the true stories, about what was happening to the race, be it in the South, the tragedies and the lynchings in the South and elsewhere, and also who the major spokespeople were, like the W.E.B. Du Bois and the Booker T. Washington and the Ida B. Wells. These people and their commitment to encouraging and supporting the activities of the race, you found those stories. And you also found the negative things that were happening to the community in these newspapers, and it was a rally cry. I mean, in several situations, you will see that the Chicago Defender was credited with helping to spread the word that the migration out of the South needed to happen. Leave Jim Crow behind and come up north. So, no, there was not a quid pro quo of news in the predominantly mainstream press, in contrast to the Black press at the time.
So when you were doing all this research, and you loved history and you took a lot of classes in college, what did you learn from this experience? I mean, what changed? What was reinforced? What are the kind of things that you're oh, wow, I had no clue, or, man, this was worse or better than I thought?
Well, I think that the biggest takeaway that I am, that comes to mind, because, is that there's just so many stories that can be told. And so many different approaches to telling them. And so the opportunity for more and more stories is just right there at your fingertips. And that was, frankly, a revelation in the sense, in the context that you can become dulled by the status quo. And that, for many, was a part of what was happening in stories. And at the same time I say that, but there's been authors telling stories of African American history for decades. But now it's becoming more prominent. Comes to mind is Beverly Jenkins, a wonderful author of historical romance. Stories are filled with fabulous history and, wonderfully researched, wonderfully told. And I think one of her books is, I just saw something where she's reissuing one of her books that's 25 years old. So she's been writing these stories. Yes, it's Indigo. She's been writing these stories for decades. And there are other authors out there. They don't all come to mind right now for me. But it's like she was carrying the torch and telling the stories for a long time, and now there's more people in the mix telling stories of African American history, and it's just exciting that there's more opportunity in the marketplace, as well as hopefully people are also going back and looking at stories that they may not have been aware of, like those written by Beverly Jenkins and others. I also
Brenda
write
Jackson is another one. Yeah.
Oh, Brenda Jackson in the romance world, definitely Brenda Jackson. And but I also write book reviews for NPR. And it's very very satisfying thing to do. And
I was going to say, I would love it.
Well, it's the opportunity to. I'm a slow reader. That's my only challenge. I wish I could read faster, but I'm a slow reader, and when I'm writing a review, I'm going to read even slower.
Yeah,
it's just part of the thing. With NPR, a few months ago, I really wrote about some of those African American authors who've been writing for decades. I just picked three. Again, there are definitely many, but one gal, L.A. Banks, who is now deceased, died several years ago, but she wrote a series, a vampire hunter legend series, and one of the first to write fantasy vampire stories. And she wrote for St. Martin's Press, L.A. Banks, and I was a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I remember when I met her, L.A. Banks, many years ago, she shared with me one of the first things she does when she started to work on a new book was she always dug into the economy of the culture, even if it was a make-believe culture or whatever it was. How did people make money? How did they survive on the day-to-day? And that was one of the, in my research, one of the early things that I looked into was how did folks make money in the 1920s? And that's when I was exposed to policy gambling, which does play a part in the story, but policy gambling in other terms is called running the numbers or the numbers racket. And so, all of the folks that have been writing for years, another name is Donna Hill, another name, Carla Fred. These authors are hopefully, I hope, are also have an opportunity to get read. I mean, Donna's still writing quite a bit. And there's just so much, if you're going to dive in, there's so much to read. And maybe that's one of my, one of the things that challenges my heart is that I'm a slow reader. And to go back to the fact that I want to read everything, because I don't have one genre that I'm definitely dedicated to historical fiction. There's no doubt about that. But I love reading most everything. Science fiction, fantasy, romance. Just put a book near me, and I'm trying to read it.
Happy time. So tell me, can you tell me anything about the project you're writing on deadline?
I can say this much about it.
Okay.
There are some pages about at the end of Wild Women in the Blues, couple of I just think maybe one chapter from the book. And another dual timeline. It's set in 1928 and in 1968. 1928 Los Angeles, and 1968 is a road trip from Chicago to Los Angeles. The stories are definitely linked, and one of the, I'll call it for now, central characters, even though it's not a character per se. It is a building, a hotel, in fact, is a part of both storylines. And other than that, I got to get it finished and back to my editor.
Okay. So when is your deadline?
Yeah. It's next month.
Okay.
But
so we're not talking tomorrow. So I haven't taken you away from the computer.
Well, it might as well be. There are certain times where it might as well be tomorrow. But no, it's not until then. I got a little bit of breathing room on this one, but not really.
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to getting that done because we already have a date for the book to come out, and that's April 25th in 2022.
Wow. So, I mean, it's amazing how far out things have to be done. I mean, but I get it because you don't want to dump everything, like, okay, we have 35 books out today. Yeah, you got to spread it out. But, man,
there's a little
got to wait that
in
long?
Between. I'm thinking, though, that, I also have another book due this year. So that is due in December. I definitely don't have a launch date for it because I need to hand it in first. But it's due in December, and that's Wild Women in the Blues, and my second historical set in the U.S. is with Kensington Publishing, and my book called The Other Princess is set in Europe and Africa during the Victorian era, and that's my William Morrow book. Yeah, so that'll be my first biographical fiction.
Ooh, I'm excited about that one. The subject
matter is Sarah Forbes Bonetta. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that.
So I have to ask you about
just work. Work.
Terrible.
Oh, go ahead.
So we have about 2 minutes left. And so when Wild Women in the Blues is made into a movie or TV, Netflix series, who do you want to play Honoré, and who do you want to play Sawyer?
Mm-hmm.
Like Honoré young, Honoré older, and then Sawyer, who would you play? And Ezekiel.
Oh, that's a lot. Well, Alfre Woodward, with heavy makeup, I would love her to play the older Honoré, but she'd have to have a lot of makeup because she's lovely and gorgeous
I know.
I think she'd
look
right
lovely
now might be in her
too.
60s, late 60s. I totally agree. And then young Honoré Zendaya. She was. Yeah, I think she'd be interesting in that part. And she's such a multi-talented actress that could be fun. And I would say for Sawyer, it would be a younger version of Aldous Hodge. He's an actor whom I love dearly. He was in, he's only 34 now, but in his early 20s, he was in a TV series called Leverage. And I think he'd be great as Sawyer in his early 20s. And right now he was just nominated, I think, for a supporting Oscar for the movie about let me think of the name of this fabulous movie. I can't think of it right now, but it was a imaginary conversation or between because it's historical between Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, and Malcolm X and someone else, and I can't think of the four prominent, fabulous men who were, well, I think it was Cassius Clay in the movie. Anyway.
Right.
So that's who I'm thinking of as, actors who could play the part.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about Ezekiel?
Ezekiel, oh shoot, Ezekiel's a tough nut. I'm telling you. In one version, there's an actor on Grey's Anatomy. He plays Jackson on Grey's Anatomy. What is that man's name?
Didn't he it was his last episode recently?
Jesse recently, I think, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Jesse Williams is the actor's name. There's something about him that reminds me that Ezekiel would sort of fall into his bucket.
Sure.
But oh my goodness,
it's funny
casting. Nobody's asked me about who would play Ezekiel. And
I totally see this on screen. I completely see this on screen. It's just like too vivid of a story that it would not go to screen. So I'm going to tell everybody they need to make sure this happens. But it was funny because I was telling my daughter about the story. She's 17, and I was like, you have to read this book when I'm done. And I said, and then Honore's got this guy in her life named Ezekiel, and she was like a Menadiel, she's like, it's not a Menadiel, and it's like, no, it's not a Menadiel because we've been watching Lucifer, and so the brother it's like, no, it's not a Menadiel.
I knew exactly what show you were talking about. Right. Yeah.
I know. And it's sad, and I feel a little bit guilty. I guess I've gone to church too much, but there was a couple of episodes that Ezekiel comes in and he like swoops, and you can hear the swoop sound, of the wings, and he walks in and it's like my ovaries grew back. It was like, I don't think this is supposed to happen. I'm like,
this is not the right result for the angel.
My daughter was like, damn.
Yeah. Well, another show that had a lot of angels in it was Supernatural, and that was one of my faves as well. But they had everybody in there. I can't even pronounce half of them. But yeah,
I know.
But anyway, I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk about Wild Women in the Blues. I'm very excited about this book, and I love that people are sending me letters and enjoying the book and buying the book, which is available everywhere books are sold. And
it was it's at Target.
I'm thrilled.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's at Target. Yeah, debut author stuff. This is good. This is a good thing that I'm very thrilled to be a part of.
Well, I am so appreciative and humbled that you were able to come on the show today, because I know you're crazy busy. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So everybody who's been listening, this was Patricia W. Fisher. I've been talking to Denny S. Bryce. Her debut novel, Wild Women of the Blues, is out now. You can get it at Target and Walmart and all sorts of places. And she's also been featured in O Magazine, Bustle Parade, Marie Claire, a bunch of others. You have her links to her website, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest in the write-up of the show. And if you have any questions, just reach out to her. You can reach out to me, and I will look forward to that next book coming out next year. So please come back and talk to us again.
Thank you. I will. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Patricia. I appreciate it.
Anytime. And everybody out there, why don't you just read something outside your norm and just read somebody's different point of view than yours, and you never know, you might learn something pretty fascinating and fabulous. So everybody keep on reading and take care.
This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions, www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe, and welcome to our circle.